예, 세션을 시작하도록
We'll
하겠습니다.
now begin the session.
요새 다들 너무 힘드시죠?
I'm sure all of you are having great difficult time in terms of investment and also in various areas of businesses. So in this session, we are going to take a look at the bio industries and also some structural issues that are related with the investment. So up until today, the bio industry has been touted as a high-value industry. However, we now see some shrinkages. So I think now we are actually at an inflection point, and we really have to come up with a wise solution to continue the rapid growth of the bio industry. So we have a representative from the companies, research institutes, as well as the exchanges. We also have a participant, the panelists who are working in the investment agencies and so on. So with these experts from various backgrounds, we would like to have some discussion on what we can do for the future of bio industry. And if you do have any questions, please do not hesitate to interrupt our conversation and ask your questions, because I think that your feedback and comments will be very valuable. So in this regard, without further ado, we would like to begin our session. So Accountant 조완석 will give us the presentation first.
안녕하세요. 회계법인 더울의 조한석 회계사입니다.
Good afternoon. My name is Jo Wan-seok. I am the accountant of All Accounting Corporation. I'm a partner. Thank you very much for coming. So since we are going to start our discussion, I have to start the whole session by being a very brief speaker. The topic today we're going to talk about is kind of doomed and also very sad. It has been several decades since I've been an accountant so far. I've never seen any change in the bio industry from my perspective, but everybody else is complaining that it is a very difficult time. Why is that? I would like to explain what makes you feel very sad about the picture, gloomy picture of the bio industry. So the first of all, I'd like to show you what kind of shock or impact is being experienced in the market. And also I'd like to talk about the data to prove that, so what kind of data we have. And also, working in the bio industry for the last 25 years, always people ask me to look at the factors for the investment. So now I'd like to share with you what kind of factors are there for the investment. The last one is about the future, but I'm not a fortune teller. I cannot give you exact future, but I'll be just briefly talking about my past experiences to refer to. So in the bio industry, we don't have the specific data to look into the industry directly, but we have instead the data from the market, IPO market, and the public listed market. And also in the US, they have the similar market with the international biotech industry in a very, very huge market. So I've seen the trend of the stock prices. So it's the long data, the very old data. It has been up very high, and then it dropped very dramatically. It was coming from the COVID-19 when it first had a huge drop, and then also it came up again because people believe that it must be an opportunity for the bio industry when it comes to the COVID-19. However, in Korea, we do have our index as well for the biohealthcare stock in the Korean exchange. So we see the very similar trend like in the US. Now, as we saw from the Nasdaq market, the Korean exchange market has also gone through the ups and downs, just like the very fast soaring up and very quick plunge as well. And also we have the very big stocks in the big stock markets like the Celltrion and the other SK Bio. What about the medium-sized companies, and what about the companies that are listed in the Kosdaq only? So we looked into their data as well, and they also showed a very similar trend. But having a closer look, you have something very curious to know. So it is going up, and it went down, and up and down. So is it going up again? I don't know. But there is a movement dynamically. So can we really call it a bubble of biotech or not? So recently I also hear a very gloomy news saying that the biotech industry companies are not having the direct sales, and they have the huge market capitalization, which does not make sense. And the companies without enough performance can be big-sized in terms, and because they are just going down in terms of the stock price, they are just only named companies only without any substance. So with that, I also looked at the data from the Korea exchange. Starting from 2018 up until the first half of this year, I looked at the number of listed companies. They are the IPO companies, not before. So we in the middle we have the new IPOs, which is like around 70 each year. Out of that, in the bio companies, as you see from here, we do have the technology growth companies. So most of them are actually technology growth companies as the stock market. We do have the data for these technology growth companies only. So it has been about 114 companies for the last 4 years, but they are not totally biotech companies only. So I counted which are the biotech companies, and they have 24 of them. So each year they have the different list of companies. So are they the biotech companies without sales, the biotech companies which have the huge loss of the operating expenses? Are they the companies that have been bluffed so far? I was so curious to know. So out of the top 50 market capitalization companies, we have 19 biotech companies from AVN to the TreeTech. So I looked at their numbers here on the right side. They have, some of them have revenue, some of them don't. So the 4 companies didn't have the revenues. And then what is common among them is that they have huge loss of their operating expenses. And you see that they are just coming trend here. So there are mostly diagnostics companies and also the COVID-19 companies. So are they really the companies that are making up the top market capitalization companies? That is my second question. So my next question is that is really the revenue important to understand companies? So do we have to use the revenue as their evaluation? So we do have a company with this 77,683 million Korean won, and then except for one company, they did not have the losses in here. And then with the revenues, are they just making profits? Not really, because half of them are losing money, not having profits. So I became more confused with that now. So now I looked at another data. Now we compared against the initial stock price. If they have plunged from that price at the IPO day, that must be a problem for the companies. So whether they have the condition, the market increase, capitalization increase, or capital decrease. If they had the capital increase or decrease, I can also see that if they have the revenues or not. And most of them had still revenues, even after the capital decrease and increase. And then most of them also had the losses of the operating expenses, and also it was very difficult to see that because what is telling me is that they are in a difficult situation. So now I looked at the predecessor companies. Like, for example, we have the Celltrion, which is the leading company of the biotech in Korea. What has happened to Celltrion prior to the IPO? So when it was beginning to be in the market, the stock valuation, and so this is after the IPO as well, so starting from 335.4 billion to 32 trillion won in 10 years. So it took 10 years for Celltrion to move up that way. And also prior to that, they spent about 15 years to grow the business. And then they also had the bypass IPO. And then after the bypass IPO, I understand that Celltrion had a lot of difficulties. They had to suffer a lot. The market response was not so good for the company, but they never say that anymore now. I looked at another company which is called Alteogen Incorporation. It was established in 2008 and IPO was in 2009. Recently, it reached the point of 2.7 trillion won. So in the beginning of the 4 years, they had the difficulties, and then when they reached the peak of the stock price, they had the very meaningful licensing. So maybe at that time they had a very good results or performance and a visible performance, although it was not perfect. But it took more than 10 years for the company to reach that pinnacle. So mostly the companies had to wait more than 10 years to reach that level of success. So market should have waited for longer than 4 or 5 years. If we judge the companies after 4 or 5 years only, that can be a problem. What is also frustrating to me is the fact that we have to look at other companies. So far, we have looked at the biotech companies only, bio-industry companies only. Maybe 200 or 300 companies must be listed so far, but we have so many other unlisted companies in this industry. There are so many others not in the stock market. What about them? So if I had more time, I wanted to look at all of the data, but it will take forever, so I couldn't do that yet. The last 25 years, when I have a meeting with outside investors, they always tell me that there are 4 things to consider in terms of making the investment into the bio industry. So they are not in the order of the importance, they are just the 4 of them. They say they have to look at the business items, pipeline progress, financial status, and intellectual property condition. These 4 factors are important to decide whether you will become an investor or not for these bio companies. Having said that, now let's look at this. This is the case of Alteogen. They have the annual report like this. They have the status of the R&D here. They also have the reference points here. They have a lot of information up until there. They have the performance of R&D, which is to be viewed as a reference. So this is the available data in the market. So that's for the IPO company. But what about the unlisted companies differently from this? On what basis can we and investors and institutional investors look into those non-listed companies? So that's the worry I have now. What about the unlisted companies? Then now let's talk about the future. The future is not known to us, actually. It's very difficult to say the future. So I looked at instead the past, like 15 years in the past. So far in the healthcare industry, it has been gone up so far. So we have the number here in the blue boxes on the left, 2005, 2008, and 2022. The reason to pick these years is because I had seen big shock in the bio industry in those years. And do you remember, in 2005, we had the scandal of Dr. Huang about the stem cell. So everybody called him a scam, but he was able to resist such a suspicion, and so the market was also sustained the shock. In 2008, it was GFC, global financial crisis, and that was external factor. All the companies in the capital market were in trouble, and bio industry didn't suffer that much. They resisted the shock. Now I can tell you that they resisted because venture capital amount was like 1 billion at that time. Then it became to 20 billion. Now we also grown up to more than the multiple times. Now in 2022, we have another shock for the bio industry. Is it because of the fault of bio industry? My belief is that there's nothing wrong with the bio industry itself. That's it from me for now. So I'll continue my discussion with all the other panelists joining them. Thank you very much. It has been the presentation regarding the valuation of the bio industry and bio companies. The reality that we face at the moment is multifolded. We have external factors like in the Russian-Ukraine war and also the conflicts between the U.S. and China. We have the supply disruptions giving the stress to the market, having the interest rate going up, which leads to the shy away of investing into the venture capitals and venture investments. Having said that, the Korean market is also affected by that. We have the guidelines coming from August regarding the new to be released, but with the newly listed companies, there can be many more stress applied to the market. So not just external factors, but also internal factors in Korea are the basis where the industry is in trouble with. So is it really Korean thing, or is it something that all of the world populations are facing at the moment? So, Mr. Wang, would you like to compare the Korean market against the international one, and what kind of alternatives do you have?
네, 안녕하세요. 저는
So good afternoon. I am from the Tamil accounting firm, and my name is Seong-bum. And I understand that many of you here today are having a lot of difficulties, and as an account firm, we also have our own difficulties as well. As you know, in the past, when the market was booming, at the time we had a lot of clients who want to get the counseling services from our firms, and usually within 1 to 2 years they succeeded with the IPO. So even for the designated investigation, maximum 2 years was enough before they are taken to the listed market. But currently our clients, fortunately, they have enough coffer, and therefore they don't really have the cash shortage issue. And they were selected as a potential unicorn company, but now they're having difficulty for IPO listing. And also there are many players who are suffering and who are in worse conditions than these clients, and many of them are now suffering from cash shortage. So in the sense, I think overall the industry is suffering a lot. And I think this is not limited to Korea. Rather, as you could see from the slide by Mr. Cho, even in the US market, you see that in 2020, they reached their peak. And since then, the index has continuously been declining. But in fact, this is nothing but returning to the pre-COVID era. So PwC believes that as for the valuation of the biotech firm, we're actually in an era of normalization and correction period. While the stock prices are declining and external instabilities are increasing, as well as the interest rate is increasing. And because of these external factors, we also see rapid declining in the US market for the IPO of the biotech firms. So in 2021, there were about 104 IPO cases in the US market, which secured $15 billion in total. And in the only first half of the 2021, there were only 14 cases, and the fund amount that are secured was only $2 billion. So in terms of number of IPO cases and also the amount they secured, they only still represent only 15% of the previous year. So this indicates that the IPO market has actually come to a almost like complete stop. However, the US does have a different funding channel, which is a M&A, aside from IPO. So in PwC, in 2021 and 2022, we reviewed how many M&A cases occurred in the US. And of course, in 2022, compared to 2021, the M&A cases actually declined. So in terms of number of deals, in only first half of 2021, there was about 137 cases, which is a 33% declining from the previous year. And also in terms of the deal amount, in the first half of this year, it was amounted to the $61.7 billion, so about 58% decrease from the previous year. However, if you look at the IPO cases as well as the amount of deals, so they have declined rapidly. However, comparatively speaking, the M&A has constantly been pursued in the US market, and it still survived. So in Korea, we have too many biotech startups, and they only target, their sole target is the Kosdaq listing. However, the US shows some different picture, that because they have a more mature financial market, and also because of the COVID situation, they actually accumulated huge amount of cash and liquidity especially among big farmers. So through them, still the ecosystem is surviving and operating. So at PwC, the life science leader of the U.S. PwC, his main role is M&A. So he arranges and provides the counseling services for major M&A deals with the major big farmers, which indicates that M&A deals are still very active in the U.S. market, where in Korea we see very few of them. So for licensing out, I think this has already been conducted, especially with the major farmers. So in terms of the securing of the funding sources, so we also have to take a look at the global market, not just the domestic markets, and we have to work hard to penetrate into the global market and to secure global funding sources. Of course, we can also think about the IPO, like the Nasdaq listing, for the short-term goal, but this is not an easy goal at all. It's very daunting and it's very costly. So we could seek diverse tracks and channels because we have various types of the licensing deals and networks with the global big farmers. Then one of the options that you can consider is M&A, especially under the current market situation. I think that this could be a very viable option. Thank you very much.
Just like in the U.S. market, if they have the equity system, probably the structure might work. However, we do not have the perfect equity system in Korea. We're just in the development phase. So if we have the further activation of M&A market, that would be more desirable according to many. So the M&A, the market should be further activated with the investors having the knowledge about this. How can we approach and have their boost of the confidence in the market? That's the issue. So the IPO has been the popular choice so far, maybe too much concentrated. All the institutional investors have opted this IPO only because that is the only way to make it go. So other than the IPO, what other measures do we have in terms of activating this market? How can we overcome these challenges of the industry for now? So if they have the Series A or Series C investment, how can they develop their strategies toward investors? Yes, thank you very much. My name is Kang Ju-soo from V&H Investment. We've been talking about the external factors so far, but as an investor, what I've experienced in the real market is as follows. I also resonate with other partners in the market and also the collaborators, so I can also get you their feedback as well here. As an investor, our company is also doing some fundraising. Interest rate increase impact is much bigger than you think, actually. Probably, as you might feel, we have the VCs and many other investors or the accelerators. They are not using their own money. They are actually getting the money from others. Some of them are public funds. They can be private funds as well. But anyway, they are also filtering through the money from outside to make investment into the venture companies or the bio companies. Because of the interest rate increase, they do not want to wait for long because that's so risky, they think. And also, they do not have the bravery going into the market, and the VCs are having difficulty of having the fund, not just for the bio industry, but also all kinds of the venture companies are struggling to have their investments for investors. Having said that, the bio industry as a sector is now having a different picture, different from the past when they were regarded as a promising and lucrative one. But nowadays, they have the picture of being so much losing the profits, and also they suffer a lot of discounts in the valuation of the market. So they have dual challenges that they have now. In this arduous circumstances, in order to survive, they have to think of many other options. I also have been thinking about the option as well. So I think at least more than 1 year, the cold winter will be resisting. So what is important for you is to have the cash equivalent conditions. You have to be frugal. As I emphasized to those companies, you cannot spend away your human talent expenditures, human resource expenditures, or the trials expenditures like you did before. So you have to say that everything will be too much expensive, pricey to you. So you have to be very frugal, and also you have to put your priority to use money for. So you have to have a choice and concentration. Another thing which is linked to the first one is to have the good management of the milestones. Whether it is a IPO or M&A, you have to look attractive to the eyes of the investors. You should have very attractive assets. Assets, I mean the sellable products. It's not about what you want to research into. It should be about what you want to sell. It should be about what others look at you about. So you have to be adaptive to the market when you choose your projects. So that has been my advice given to those companies so far. Another thing which is quite important is about the valuation. Many of the companies are in the growth phase, so stock price of these growth companies have gone down as well, and also the non-listed companies have actually are more pricey than the listed ones for now. So you have to keep that in mind, that the listed companies have some kind of market capitalization and what kind of funds you can get if it is a Series B, and what kind of money you can get as Series C, and so on. So you can have the reverse calculation to know how much you can get from the investors in order to plan further investment and further investors as well. So you have to be wise in the calculation of the money you can get. It is different from last year when it was so easy to get the funds from the investors. At that time, these companies looked like winners. Everybody envied the companies. So you might have wondered that that company looks exactly the same as mine. Why is that they get the funds and when I can't? But now look at the market. Those companies who had been invested last year are now struggling more than you are, because their bubble has gone down. So even if they have progressed into the projects, they have the less valuation, and then the investors who made an investment at that time do not agree with that, the loss of market capitalization. They have the conflicts between the investors and investees. So they also have the struggles with the progress of the business projects themselves. So look at them, they are struggling more than you are. So what is important the most is the growth, is the fact that you have to get the money that is needed for your growth and survival. And then your investor should be high quality and the better ones for you. And you have to make preparation to find the better investors. The reason for M&A not so prospering in Korea is because we do not have the big pharma in Korea. We do have the legal restraints as well. There are so many technical issues. But I believe that the biggest reason for the lack of M&A is the valuation. So far, the bio industry had this so high valuation, so it was not a right target for M&A activity. As an investor, I believe that the past several years were the era of the IPO, and I believe that the future several years will be the years for the M&A. So you have to look attractive to be a target of M&A. You should have the very attractive structures and assets as well. So you should have the network built with those people in the market, and you have to be ready for the due diligence when the time comes. So you have to be ready for the further growth when you have the opportunity of M&A. So get ready for this if you are interested. The last but not least, what is important is from the perspective of the company, you should have the good relationship with the investors. So the relationship between investee and investor is quite important because companies themselves cannot solve all the problems, whether they are under IPO or M&A. You should have the money coming from the investors and also supporters come from there, right? But everything is about people. It's people business. The investors are people, and I myself am controlling more than 10 companies in my portfolio. I cannot give exactly the same attention to all of these companies in the portfolio. There can be some more attractive companies, more communicable companies in the portfolio basket. So I naturally tend to talk more with those attractive ones than the less attractive ones. So relationship with the investors should be something you have to nurture. So I have my advice so far. Well, thank you.
So I think that now we really have to go beyond the abilities of single CEO. Of course, the high valuation is a problem, but another concern that I have is the companies that have entered into the clinical phases, whether it's the phase 1 or 2 or 3, they have to have the fundraising, and if the fundraising has some problem, then it will delay the clinical trials, and this will further create the down valuation, and this will be a vicious circle. So I do have a concern whether it can slow down the growth of the entire bio industry if these vicious circles become visible. So in the sense, I think that the exchange's policies are also highly related with the growth speed of the industry. And in the market, we have the new guideline, and so raising expectation that the bio industry will be okay. But then also there are some people who claim that we have to still have a wait and see approach, and we have to wait until like next year. So in the sense, I would like to hear about the exchange's perspective and also their timeline and new policies that they're going to introduce. And also with regards to special listing for tech IPO, yes, there are several requirements. However, this year they actually streamed down the requirements to only a few. So in terms of the bio industry valuation and listings, what's your perspective? Mr. Yi. Thank you very much. I am from the KOSDAQ Innovation Support Team. My name is Lee Won-guk. So the topic of this year's, rather today's session is the valuation of the bio firms. And so I will first touch upon that, and then I'm going to talk about the KOSDAQ's future policy direction. Recently, the real estate prices, there have been some heated controversy whether it has some bubbles or not. Likewise, we also have similar debates whether the bio firms do have the bubbles or not. And we cannot really come to clear conclusion. But as for the house and real estate, especially the apartment, the products are standardized, and also the location is important for pricing. So if you take that into consideration, in fact, the housing price, yes, it's determined by supply and demand, but you can have an easy prediction for how the price will go. However, the bio industry is different. That if for a layperson, it's very difficult to understand the industry, and there are a lot of jargons and also special knowledge and expertise that are required in order to understand the industry. So I have done the reviewing work for biotech firms for a few years, and in fact, one of the most difficult industries where the review is very difficult is bio industries. So sometimes I felt that it's really beyond my understanding and beyond my capacity. But as you know, I think that all companies are same, that corporate valuation or the initial public price, they reflect the demand, and in fact, the issuers and underwriters, they come to conclusion on how much IPO they will take. But as for the KOSPI market, according to the Korean law and regulation, there is evidence that take a look at the whether the market cap can be justified. So if there is a too much valuation, then sometimes we raise questions, and also the listing committee asks questions in order to understand how the valuation came out. But by principle, the valuation is based on market mechanism, so we are not directly involved in that. And as for the special listing for tech IPO, so for buyer firms, because they don't have the visible financial performance, and they receive and attract investment only based on their future potential, and therefore they usually follow the track of technical review for IPO listing. However, the KOSDAQ, we have a double size of the cultivating companies as well as regulating them. So we provide a so-called priming water to attract venture capital to facilitate the growth of the startups. But at the same time, we work on the regulation and control side as well. So in order to ensure the quality of the companies that are listed in the public markets, and striking the balance between the two is very important for us. And therefore, during the review process, we try to reflect both the necessity for cultivating and controlling the market. But there could be it can be a chicken and egg issue, because a lot of biotech firms, they are taken to the IPO market through the special listing system, and therefore many of them are not complete, are not mature compared to other industries. But so although their businesses are not complete yet, if they do have the potential, then we try to provide some assistance so that they can be successfully listed in the market. However, still these companies do have uncertainty for the future and also the risk, and therefore these risks, I believe, must be reflected in the corporate evaluation. So the company valuation has to be made in a conservative manner. I think this is beneficial for reviewers and also for companies themselves as well. And also, as for the high valuation or excessive valuation, from my perspective, excessive valuation means one thing, that let's say that a company, after the foundation, they received the series funding from venture capitalists and also the angel investors. And usually the last value or the latest valuation is the ceiling point, and they secure multiple rounds of investments. But then during the process, if they fail to produce any kind of tangible outcome, such as the clinical trials or actual drug development, but still I think these companies, they're very difficult to lower down their values because of some interest of the existing investors. We understand the difficulty. And also a lot of bio firms, they say that their ultimate goal is to have new drug development, and that's their vision. However, many of these firms that are listed with these visions have failed to produce clinical trials or any kind of evidences to back up their claim. But because of some reality issues, valuation has been made, but with some gap against their actual situation. But we are not directly involved in this kind of valuation. However, I think compared to other industries, bio industries to have bigger risk and also bigger uncertainties. And therefore, I think these probability of success and uncertainty and risk should be reflected in valuation. So amongst the diverse scenarios with the best and worst case scenarios, we have to take a conservative stance. Then I think that we can have better appeal to investors. So this is about the valuation. And also, currently, the KOSDAQ has conducted the project to standardize the assessment requirements for tech IPO. And I believe the details of the projects have already been explained in public. But let me recapitulate that. So first of all, we have 24 technical review agencies. And after we adopted the technical review system, in the beginning, we only applied it to the bio industries, but then later we expanded to the AI and other IT firms. And in year 2019, the foreign companies with their great technology potential, they can also be listed to the Kosdaq market with this channel, with this track. But then we found that the 24 technology review agencies, they have different requirements. So there was a need for standardization. For example, like companies have to receive single A, triple A ratings from multiple review agencies. Only then they can have, they can be listed in the stock market. But then we found that there are a lot of gaps and differences among the requirements of different review agencies. And also last year, 10 companies succeeded in the public listing through the special listing for tech IPO track, and 9 of them were bio firms. And we found that we actually have to have a more specific review system that can reflect the special characteristics of industries. And also, the year before last year, there were 52 application cases, but last year it went up to more than 70, which means that we have to have more technical review agencies. So because of these needs, we have carried out this standardization project. So in the past, we had a concept-based review system, and we tried to streamline them and do away with the duplication. And also for bio IT and AI and metaverse, we are going to develop the industry-specific review requirement and review criteria. So I think the project will be complete in late August, and it's not going to be implemented right away. Rather, we are going to conduct the pilot test with 10 firms in order to simulate some biases and also the gaps. And we will also collect the opinions and feedback from industries. So maybe late this year or early next year, we'll be able to implement the standardization. The reason why we pursue this is because we are not trying to build a more rigorous process and review process for buyer firms for IPO listing. No, this is not our intention. In fact, the tech firm that applied for the special listing for tech IPO, one of their complaints was that the requirements from different review agencies are just too different. So like, for example, like they pass the technical review by one agency, but then fail to pass by different agencies. So we want to complement and address this gap issues. Again, the Kosdaq's intention is not to raise the barrier and introduce a more rigorous process. Rather, our intention was only to standardize the requirements. And one of the exit measures for bio firms in Korea should be M&A, but in Korea, M&A is not active. And therefore, in reality speaking, I think the IPO could be the most viable option or the only viable option for many firms. We understand that. So yes, we understand that the number of listing cases are declining, but Kosdaq is also making its own efforts to support the bio industries. So this year, about 97 applications were made, and 7 were decided to be listed. So I think that this year we'll also see pretty high number of bio firms being listed in the Kosdaq market.
Thank you very much. When you were designated as a Kosdaq member, now of course it's important to have the regular particular requirements met, and also you have to have the business requirements and the whole industry so that you can have the desirable outcome. I hopefully think so. And also, Mr. Yu, I'd like to have a question. So you can talk about the current conditions and also from the perspective of investors, as well as we can have all other issues in the ecology as a whole. So, Professor Yu, from your perspective, what are the problems or issues with the bio industry, and what is the requirement for this industry to have a quantum jump? What can be done correctly in this ecology? Yes, I'm less the person to talk to, and I'm redundant with the rest of you, so that's my position is quite disadvantageous. So I have a question to you, of course. So what do you think is the most pricey wine per bottle? What was the record of the wine as in the bottle? So it was actually 700 million won when it was sold. It was the 1989 vintage of Romane Conti was that one. And some people say that it is outrageous to have that in such a price. And some other people said, I would like to wanted to have that and I couldn't afford it. It's so regrettable. So that's not how you look at it differently. So when you come to talk about the bubble, some other experts say that why are you thinking that bubble is actually abnormal one? So if you want to talk about bubble, then you should have the experts invited to talk about it. And if it is the bubble, who made the bubble from the beginning? The experts and the professionals here, and as I have the knowledge of the 700 million won of the wine, a bottle like 700,000 US dollars. So is it really expensive or not? And if you want to talk about the price, you have to be an expert on that, and you have to have different perspectives. When we talk about the market, we have two types of the investors. One is the financial investor, the other one is strategic investors. So we have FIs and SIs. The FIs are mostly interested in making money. They use money to make money. So you have to think that there can be other investors than the financial investors. We have other venture capitalists and many others. If you have the strategic way of having your investor, you might have a really different game to play here. If you have the strategic investors, they will not let you have this and that only because of money. So because we are talking about the money-making game only, we say this is bubble and we have to follow it in the bubble trend. But in the US, there is a trend of 1 to 7. So there is a 0.1% of the company to be listed that has not been invested at all. In Korea last year, all of the startup companies, including all the sole proprietaries, they have 115,000 of them, and out of them, 20,000 were startups, and 1,500 were listed and or subject to IPO, and 1/3 of them actually got listed. So out of 20,000, only 50 survived as a listed company. If you're not one of them, you have to find other ways. But when 19,500 people, companies are trying to find the M&A, they have to be sold by somebody else. But also you said that M&A is not popular in Korea. As you said, M&A is subject to the companies. After you pass the qualifications, you can make registration. You can be subject to the IPO. But for the M&A, you have to find the right strategic investor. M&A is something you create, something that you apply for. So without having any basis of the M&A, if you want to create this thing, it would be extremely difficult. But in the US, the M&A is taking like 97% of the possibility or the probability of companies to be in. That 97% is not a result of coincidence, because if you have the starting line, you have the end line of the whole running. It's like the short distance running. So if you have the M&A route that is different from IPO route. But some companies say that once they try to IPO and if they fail, they go to M&A route. That's not the correct way of going forward, because if you have other companies in the U.S., they do not ask a lot of questions to you. You have the technology, what is the power, they have different criteria to evaluate you as a company. So if I be very blunt to you, I have to tell you that 89% of the companies listed last year were the loss-making companies. That's in the U.S. In advanced countries, it is normal for a loss-making company to be listed. It is okay for losing money when you become listed. Especially last year, more than 1,000 companies in the U.S. which were listed. Normally, less than 200 is the number, but last year it was an exception because more than 1,000 companies were listed. So statistically, it is normal to see that the number of the loss-making companies is increasing. So you should not compare the last year and this year only because they have the different numbers, because we cannot just have the base effect from the previous year. So I myself have been making the 2 bio funds for the last 20 years. I also had been subject to the 60 investors. At that time, I didn't have any criteria. So what I did was to have the 60 companies to be distributed, each company having 200 million or 300 million. I had been an investor like that. It was like spray and pray. So at that time, I was lucky enough to have my prayer answered. So 30 companies out of them had been listed. But now, in order to have a second jump, we should not be solely focused on IPO only. We have to think of M&A. We have to go for the route of the M&A as well. We have to think about the essential parts of M&A. So even though we have the IPO regulations loosed, we cannot have more than 7 or 8 companies. What is more important here is that having passed all the requirements of the IPO, and then even if they are listed in the Korean market, there is a limitation of getting the fund. The reason for having IPO has been washed away in that case. So if you have an opportunity, I would like to ask you to use the flip in the global market. So for example, you can move to another company for the global market so that you can have the different headquarters in other countries. So please think of using flip system. In the US, PA is used to have the biotech investment because they don't want to spend more time as before, and this is a huge amount of investment. They cannot have the lump sum investment for longer than 5 to 10 years. So they have the phase 1 investment only using SPC. So if that phase 1 is successful, they can create another SPC for phase 2. So that will be the following of the path of the project financing that will reduce the burden of the stakeholders in here. So you can think about these options as well. So as of today, the number of unicorns around the world is 2,500. Out of them, bio and pharmaceutical companies are only 25. Only 25 unicorns are there in the world. That is really showing the nature of the bio industry of today. So it can be very discouraging for the companies in bio industry. So if you want to know the truth, that it is very difficult to have the money returned and have the profits in 30 as IPO only. So you have to find your strategic investors very strategically. As Mr. Kang mentioned, you have to show that your companies are worthwhile to be invested, and you have to find your right investors so that you can get the synergy effect and having the very good results. So I told you about the $700,000 worth of Romani Conti with the vintage of 1989, and you can have that kind of success in your business as well without having too much revenues, without having revenues at all. Sometimes you have to change your perspective. You have to think out of the box. And if you are able to find the good fit with your potential investor, you will be able to seize the opportunity. Thank you.
이상하게 비싼 와인은 맛있게 느껴져요.
So Very straightly, the pricier the wine, the more tasteful wine, the more tasty, I guess. Although we have time constraint, if you have any question, we'll entertain some questions from the floor. But right now, I think we don't really have questions apparently. So one last thing that I would like to talk about is that, yes, we have investors and government institutions, and they have made huge investment in bio firms, and they are now complaining that what did they do? So bio industry, I think, is under harsh complaint, and now we are in a period of building reliability and trust from different stakeholders. So in order to earn trust from other stakeholders, what kind of things the bio firm should do? And also, I think we are actually having a new opportunity. For example, like we have a lot of new access structures being developed and crafted. So this will be the last questions before concluding the panel discussion session. I'll be very brief. Today, I actually want to make some complaints because for the past 20 years, I have been in the bio industry, and bio firms nowadays are suffering a lot. So I wanted to make some several business proposals. Number one, for bio firms, when you do IR, yes, you explain about pipeline, right? But you should not be too aggressive because later it will come to you as a boomerang, I guess. And when it returns and start to attack you, then you will be known as a liar in the industry. And therefore, you really have to be fact-based when you do the IR. And also, if there are any changes, then please immediately notice them so that you can maintain good relations with investors. So if there are any issues, then please let investors know immediately and also address those issues. And by doing so, I believe we can earn trust from investors. And another proposal for investor is that, secondly, for investors, so because of the interest rate hike, we now see decrease in liquidity and shortage of capital in the market. And we also see fewer cases of the IPO listing, so which means that the possibility of IPO is also declining, and which makes the bio industry less attractive. But as mentioned by Mr. Lee, we really have to have a standardized criteria. So bio firms without revenue, but that's actually some innate characteristics of the bio industry, so we have to have better understanding. And also for investors, when you receive investment, usually you receive that in the form of the preferred stock. But I think if we could receive investment in the form of common stock, then that will be good for everybody. So if you can make investment in the form of common stock, then that will be very helpful for many bio firms. So this is the proposal that I would like to make. Mr. Kang? Ms. Kang? I also want to make two proposals. So in terms of the nature of the financial institutions and also the investors' protection, so non-listed venture startups are receiving investment mainly in the form of public fund. Why? Because if you are just pursuing the profit, and you cannot really force companies to go IPO. So there are a lot of public funds, for example, like National Pension Service and so on. And their money has been invested to cultivate bio industry, create job opportunities to produce profits, which will in turn facilitate further investment for bio firms. So these funds are to create virtuous circle, and I believe that we really have to make the efficient and best use of this fund. So when you receive investment, you shouldn't think that this is a money, blind money that you can use whatever you want for your research. Rather, you have to bear in mind that you receive a very precious taxpayers' money from the government. So we have to make the best use of them and return them in larger scale. So the companies, I think, have to understand the nature of this fund. So this public fund has been injected in order to cultivate the ecosystem, but IPO is not the only solution, so companies should be ready for M&A as well. In bioindustry, I understand that it takes a long time to see some tangible benefits, so we have to have some wait-and-see approach as well, and we have to wait and be patient. But at the same time, I think biofirms should also question themselves whether they are really globally competitive, and they have to make their own efforts to enhance their competitive edge. Up until today, I have actually listed more than 100 firms, and I have two criteria for IPO listing. So if industries do not have the visible financial outcomes, and rather they have great future potential, then listing should not be an end, but it should be a means. So the listing should provide an opportunity to quantum leap for these firms. So I actually evaluate this potential. And also most of the bio firms, they follow the track of the special listing, which means that there are some exceptions. And I believe that the bio firm should establish some role models, and also, the listing should not be utilized as a means to fatten the wallet of investors only. And also, the fund should be used in a wise and manner. And also, in order to cultivate and foster the growth of the bio industry, sometimes we take risk. So this is something that the bio firm should understand. And if you continue to work hard, then I think that your efforts anyway will be evaluated and reflected in the review process and work to your advantage. Biofirms, I think you can target overseas markets. We have about 2,500 listed biofirms in Korea. So even if you are succeeded in the listing, you will be only one player out of 2,500. And also the market size represents only 1.3% of the global market, so we have very small market, and therefore the biofirms, I think, should turn their eyes to overseas markets. And because of the rising tension between China and the U.S., in the past, about a lot of Hong Kong and China-based firms have been listed in the NASDAQ, but now the channel has been blocked. But I think that this could give an upper hand to Korean firms. And therefore, please turn your eyes to overseas markets and be aggressive in penetrating into overseas markets. Then I believe that K-Bio will successfully expand its presence in the global market. Anyway, please be confident and have a big picture. Mr. Seo? Management, I think, is the art, comprehensive art. And I understand that most of the entrepreneurs in biofirms, they do have the engineering background or a science background, but what we are talking about is M&A, and therefore I think that they also have to have some management and business mindset as well. So I hope that a lot of leaders in bioindustries will expand their capacities.
Thank you very much for taking your time. Since time was limited, we're not able to entertain all the answers and questions, and also the time discussions. Well, we have to have a bigger horizon and longer horizon so that we can see the potential as a company. So probably that will make the foundation for the company in that way. I know that you must be lonely and you must feel lonely in this time of the period. But please feel positive and look at the situation from a different perspective so that we can collaborate together to make the bio industry as our cornerstone once again for the Korean industry and Korean economy. Thank you very much for your hard work.